All right, what is up, everyone? I'm Jeff Lund, and this is the Mediocre Alaskan Podcast. Talking with Alex Ramirez and Dave Schonzeit. They just entered the podcast realm with their beer, fly fishing, and food podcast. They're 3 or 4 episodes in at this point.
We got 3 of them.
3 of them in there.
Yeah.
Listen to that if you follow them on Instagram, then you can get notifications there. But you post yours on Anchor, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
And why did you guys start off with the podcast? What spurred the decision?
Actually, it was about last year. Dave and I, we did a trip. Him and his wife came out to see us, and we just had another great trip. And it always involved fishing, food, and beers. We hit a couple breweries, and then I went to visit him in December. And I told him, I said, "Man, I've been having this idea about doing a podcast that just talks about beer, fly fishing, and food." And everybody has these memories of these cool trips that they've taken with some awesome people. And I was like, oh, the food was on point, the beers we had were great, and the fishing was epic. And you get around with your buddies and start talking about all this stuff, and we're like, man, why don't we just share those stories? I mean, Dave and I have some really cool stories from the trips that we've taken. So we're like, dude, let's just make a podcast and share them with the world. So that's kind of how it started. And we recorded our first 2 episodes in the backyard of his house after having quite a few beers and
quite a few beers.
We felt like it went well. So here we are, man. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a lot of the podcasts out there are just for people to talk about how great they are at fishing or hunting or just trying to get sponsorships. And so it's the ones that I enjoy the most are the ones that are just ordinary people who are probably every bit as deserving of some of that higher level, sponsorships or whatever. But it's just fun to get that real sort of perspective where it's just people who sound a lot like the normal everyday hunter, angler, outdoorsman, whatever. That's just a lot of fun to listen to, and I'm glad you guys are involved.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, where we were coming from, is that same shared perspective with you, Jeff. The majority of the podcasts I've been exposed to, and I think Alex as well, did come from more of an educational standpoint versus an entertainment standpoint. And so we decided we were just going to draw upon some really basic blueprints and gigantic parameters involving, the food aspect, the fly fishing aspect, and the beer aspect, which we call the trifecta. It's the greatest part of all the trips we take. And I think that really taps into the psyche of every group of friends or fishing buddies. Collectively, everybody's taken those trips where you had these things that just, the fish that bent the rod, and the beers you enjoyed afterwards, and the food you did, on the hibachi or whatever, all those kind of culminate in this really amazing memory. And that's a very collective and applicable thing to every group of friends and fishing buddies. So we just kind of wanted to put a different spin on it. And that's kind of how the whole thing came about. I mean, again, it was just, we didn't really apply too many rules to it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I like about the podcast, and, went on the Facebook and did a little bit of research or whatnot, but you guys are fly anglers, fly fishers, whatever the correct word is, who happen to enjoy beer. You're not the other way around. Some of those people go out there and they just plop down with a 24 of Coors Light. They're kind of like beer drinkers who happen to fish. But like that beer is, as there's something about that. You come back to camp and you have the beer, waiting for you in the cold water. And then, like, exactly, you start making that food, man. It's just that's that visceral memory that you can then recall the fish that you caught that day, rather than it's all about as many as possible.
Right. That's very true. And like you said, visceral is a great word. Also cathartic. When you really embody the whole experience, it just becomes cathartic and something. Like we're all facing right now. I mean, the world's kind of been turned on its head. And, I think we're all kind of just trying to make sense of what's happening and process what's happening day to day. And that's a different experience for each and every one of us. And we're all kind of just doing the best we can. But to kind of be able to step outside what our reality is right now and step into that time bubble where we were just, sharing some really awesome experiences with some good people. And we were just in a whole better headspace. I think right now, more than ever, that's extremely therapeutic and medicinal. And we're really excited to be kind of partaking in it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many elements to it too. Like today, after I was done with the Zoom meetings with the school, tying some flies. So it's something that you don't even have. You can
Right.
still be involved in it without being outside. And if you don't have anything else like that, if your life is work, and you come home and it's just, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to decompress and I'm going to watch TV. That means that if there's no work and TV, there's like nothing else. I think that
Right.
you approach your life so much better if your time off the clock is better. So you show up to work, I'm in a better space because
totally.
my away from work is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And like I said, I think that's what fly fishing for me, but I think, a lot of people that really do it or tie flies. I mean, that's what kind of fills your cup, and I know my wife knows that. So every time I say, hey, I want to go fishing, she's like, yeah, go fishing. Cause she knows when I come back, I'm like super jazzed. I'm excited. I want to hang out. I want to do whatever it is for them. Cause I've already, done whatever I needed to do to get me to a state of, to be, friendly, I guess.
Functional.
Functional. Right. Yeah. That's a better word.
So because your podcast is beer, fly fishing, and food, are you currently drinking a beer?
We had this conversation. Yeah, we actually just had this conversation as to whether or not we were going to drink. And I don't know, Jeff, if you listened to any of the ones that we released already, but I mean, we're pretty pickled, me especially. And, I think just from a respect standpoint, we wanted to come at it. I listened to a few of your podcasts last night, and I enjoyed them. You touched on some things that were very entertaining to me, and some things that I could definitely relate to being a fly fisherman. But to answer your question, currently I am not drinking, and Alex, I don't think you are either.
No, I'm not. And it was funny because when we talked last night, we're like, oh man, we should just crack some beer. So if Jeff asked us, we'll be like, yeah, man, this is what we're drinking. But anyway, another time.
In your honor, I have an Alaskan IPA. I'm on quarantine, so I wasn't able to go to the store, and a buddy of mine actually dropped it off. He said, man, these are on me. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. So
nice.
He'll drop by the groceries, set them outside, and then I have the check for how much it's worth. I vacuum pack it, and then I scrub the outside and put it in a little mail thing. So the exchange is pretty legit. And
dude, you got it down.
That's cool. It's necessary precautions.
Yeah.
I'm getting toward that. The incubation period is like 5 to 7 days. So once I get day 7, if I don't have any symptoms still, I'll start to feel a little bit better. But there's always that, the phantom tickle in the throat or something. Like, dude, you got to calm down.
And that's such a universal thing. The more people I've talked to, I felt like I was symptomatic for 5 days or so. And I still sometimes, like in the mornings, I'll wake up and my chest will feel a little bit heavy, and I'll just have this, this little tickle in the back of my throat, almost like, the initial onset of getting sick, when you're just like, oh, it's coming, and I keep waiting for it to progress. And I've kind of felt that way for about 5 days. And I've talked to a multitude of other people that are just like, dude, I totally relate. I have those exact same symptoms. I felt that way for 5 days. And you kind of start to wonder, like, how much is the psychological aspect factoring, the placebo aspect factoring, just, waking up, watching the news and infiltrating your brain with everything that's kind of happening, versus what's actually happening physiologically. So it's been a weird thing, I think, for a lot of people. And it's just ironic that, like you said, I mean, you just described it perfect, that little minor tickle in the back of the throat, or, whatever it might be, just kind of, it triggers that oh no reaction,
Mm-hmm. Well, it's allergy season down in California.
I know.
Last week.
Yeah, that's right.
Dude, this is like when I would get allergies when I lived down there. And so when we were at fishing last week, Alex, I was like, man, okay, we're getting toward the end of the trip, but it's a little bit chilly outside. So maybe my nose is running because it's chilly and there's a little bit of rain. And then, I get back to Kurt's house. I'm like, oh man, this guy's a first responder, and what if and then I'm like, well, no, it was crazy. It messes with your head a little bit.
It totally does, man. I the same thing too, because the allergies haven't been too bad for me, but I notice every morning that I take the dog and we go for a little walk, and I come back and come back sniffling. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And then I realize, well, it's cold, the wind's blowing. There could be some allergies. Tickle in the back of the throat could be that. So yeah, I got to tuck myself down some days.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, geez, yeah, I'm gonna go live in a cave somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey Jeff, I gotta say, I really like your I like your intro and your outro music, man. It's got like kind of a, don't worry, Alex, I won't get all out of control here, but it's got like a cool like kind of post rock feel to it. When I heard it, I thought it was cool.
It's got that free download feel to it.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, however it strikes you, it's a buzz.
Yeah.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plans shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Yeah, it was, starting up, I've changed the intro a couple different times. It just kind of is what it is. Like no one listens to a podcast because of the intro. Like the intro and the music and all that stuff just enhance it. If you don't have content, it doesn't really matter. So
Right. But having cool music doesn't help, even for 10 seconds coming in and going out.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked about beer briefly, but let's talk about think about your brain archive or your moment archive. What was the one meal that you remember? One camp out, one take, one fish. Like, what are some of those elements that you remember that are some of the best things to remember that just like, dude, I can't wait to get out again because of that? You can answer all at the same time, or you can do one at a time. We can go by fish, food, then meal, then camp out, or whatever. But what's something sticking in your brain right now?
For me, I would say Dave came up to visit me last fall, and this is the most recent one, so this is the one that's just really sticking out in my head because the fish was epic, and it had all 3 elements of it. So Dave and his wife flew up to Sacramento, and we picked them up from the airport. They hung out, and then I don't know if it was that day or not, but I just bought a new jet sled boat to run the rivers here in California to chase stripers. So the striper season is already kind of on its tail end, and Dave and I and his wife decided to jump on the boat and just do a quick little afternoon session. And I went to a spot where I had caught some fish previously, and Dave stuck a nice 8-pounder. And then 10 minutes later, I stuck a 16-pound striper. And it was the biggest striper that I had caught, 1, on the fly, 2, biggest striper I've caught, in that stretch of river too. So it was like just a double whammy. So that was awesome. And then being able to share it with Dave and, having his wife there and she was taking photos. I mean, it was an awesome fish, a great battle. And it was cool to be able to experience that with Dave.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. That would be mine as well. I mean, just from, the fish standpoint, no question. I mean, to put two quality fish like that on the wagon in maybe 8 minutes apart. I think it was like back to back. And the fact that the funny thing is I fish by myself 95% of the time. It's just, I couldn't tell you why. I just, fishing for me is very personal, which is why it's cool to have a podcast platform where, I can show the other side of that and share great memories that I've experienced. A lot of the better fish of my life have come randomly when by chance I happen to be fishing with friends, which is not that often. So I would agree with you, Alex. I think that, we've had some good outings, but that one to stick like 2 quality fish in such a short amount of time. Yeah, that was pretty awesome. That was definitely awesome.
Dude, that was killer. But I would say the food, one of the meals that stuck out, it was the night that we decided to record our first podcast. Dave cooked up this killer meal, and it was just these sausages that he gets from this local market and peppers and onions. But dude, the bread I wish I could, I'll try to paint this picture so well, because he was like, oh man, he goes, I got to toast the bread. And these bread are kind of like skinny, like just skinny footballs, I would guess. They're just mini loaves, but he stuck them in your toaster, like, so you only can do half at a time. So like they're sticking out like 2 horns, and then you did half and then you flip them over to the half. But oh my gosh, that combination of the bread and the sausages and the peppers and onions, it was like a perfect combination. It was such a great meal. And we had some good beer that night too. It was
we were probably 6 or 7 in at that point too, which didn't hurt the food.
Yeah, I think everything tastes good after that point. But those are the ones that that are the most recent ones that just really stand out to me. Good food, good beer, good fish.
When I headed down there last week, one of the things that Kurt wanted, he's like, dude, I know that you've kind of been down on the Delta, but there's nothing like striper on the fly rod. I grew up here in Southeast Alaska, so at least half of the experience for me is getting to this beautiful place that is, pristine. The river should look this color. It should be surrounded by this. And so when I lived in California, it was really tough for me to go out to the Delta, just because the access points that I would have would, be off Hammer Lane or Ben Holt. And so it's just, there's styrofoam containers everywhere. And cement. And it was gross. There was nothing about that experience that was fun. You could catch a nice little bass, but you're just like, it's just not the same. And so when he was talking about how he went striper fishing a lot more than he went trout fishing, I thought, wow, this is kind of weird, because he and I did a lot of fishing, and up in the Sierras and everything. And so for him to be this striper guy now, I was like, dude, what the heck happened? And then he went out in his boat, and you get to some of these like sunk islands, and you're like, oh, this is cool. This feels like it's real. This feels like just some sort of lake or some sort of. This seems legit.
Oh my gosh, that whole Delta area, you're right, man. It's once you get away from, some of, like I said, those access points. I mean, it's like, people used to call it the dirty Delta, and they probably still do. But once you get out in the middle of it, you're in a whole different place. It's awesome.
Yeah, I got 2 little striper. We call them schoolies. Is that the little guys?
Yeah,
a foot long, something like that. And then one little bass. But man, I started, as I'm stripping, I'm just thinking, oh man, I'm just that huge.
Gonna get crushed.
Oh man, it didn't happen. And so that's in the back of my brain now. Now that I've gotten over my this is gross water thing, I'm excited to get down there and get that feeling.
Man, well, if you ever get a chance to come back in the summertime, we could do a little bit. A lot of those stripers, the stripers do move up into the river systems, and a lot of those striper guides will come and they'll start fishing different rivers, and we have so many, throughout the valley. I mean, you've lived here, so it makes it nice to go from stripers in the spring to then stripers in the summer in the river. So yeah, if you get an opportunity to come back here when school's out, hit me up and we'll get you on the river, because it's pretty cool in that, just floating down the river like you would in a drift boat. but yet you're swinging 8 and 9 weights, you know?
Oh, that's sweet. That is sweet. So in one of the previous podcasts, Alex, you talked about how you've been fly fishing since you were 10. So where does dry fly fishing now, where is that on the scale? Is that still the number one, but the striper fishing is really exciting? Or it seemed like you're I don't know if you want to name the river we were on last week, but it was a sweet river. There was a ton of dry fly action. Like, I was overwhelmed.
Yeah, dude, that was pretty awesome. I mean, I would say that my new love is striper fishing. It's always been a love, but now that, I mean, I bought the boat specifically to chase stripers and bass. But dry fly fishing definitely holds a special place in my heart. And I have no problem. Like, we were on the Yuba River, and it's such a great fishery. You could float it, you can walk wade it. There's some really good access points. But that is probably one of the best hatches that I've seen on the river on a rainy day when Jeff was out, when you guys were out there. That was awesome. I mean, oh my gosh. I was talking to our other buddy Kurt, who's fishing with us, that why didn't we take a video of all those heads coming up? You know, is that one point when you were on the other side of the river and we were on the other, and just watching these heads just come up, and all these, you know, just smorgasbord of bugs coming down from PMDs to, you know, March Browns, BWOs. It was wild. It was awesome.
How much when you and Kurt were kind of digesting it, when we were on our walk back to the trucks, you were talking about how it was, you know, they were feeding through all these different hatches, and I was just kind of getting into that before I moved back to Alaska, because Kurt was kind of new to it too, but we're kind of learning together a lot of that stuff. How important is matching the hatch when it comes to dry fishing, dry fly fishing?
It's very important in my mind and in my whole experience. And you know, for me, it's and matching the hatch, but I would say more so in like size and shape. You know, I think color definitely plays a key in there too. It's a little bit further down on the factor, but I think when those fish are looking up, it's that size, you know, how that fly is sitting on the water
silhouette.
That's gonna make them come up and eat it. You know, whether it's got a pink parachute or, you know, or not, or whatever it is. I think it's just the way it looks when those fish are looking up, that it's matching those other fish that are coming down. And it's not waking or doing anything, you know, funky on there. Because, I mean, even though they had a lot of fish coming up, I mean, I changed a lot of flies that day to really get some of those fish to come up and eat. And it's like, well, what is it? They want something sitting a little bit higher. They want something sitting a little bit further down, you know. But for me, I was really watching those bugs come down, and I was looking at the exact size, because like that was my first thought, was like, I need to have their exact size of natural that's coming down. Mm-hmm. So there you have it.
Yeah, it was one of those days, and I was talking to Kurt about it, that with the amount of fish that are rising, you can leave the river feeling like you had like a 20 fish day, just because every single cast you feel like it could be the one. Even though it's not, you still feel engaged the whole time, and you're exhausted just because it felt like an amazing fishing day. So you might only catch a couple fish, but it's going to be on the dry fly, and every cast you make, you're casting to a specific target, and it's unreal.
That's I totally agree. And it's like, for me, it's never been a numbers game, and I felt the exact same way coming off the river with, you know, the amount of fish that we caught. I mean, like I said, it could have been a 20 fish day, it could have been a 5 fish day, but I mean, we were targeting fish all day long, you know, fish that we could see. It was, there's nothing beats that feeling. I think, you know, the people getting into fly fishing now, I see a lot of people that are just, you know, straight nymphing and, you know, or indicator or whatever they want to, which is totally fine. But man, you get those days where you are casting to, you know, rising fish. There's no, I mean, that's, to me, that's the essence of fly fishing by far.
Yeah. On that note, I mean, if you want a good dose of humility, go fish a caddis hatch on the fire hole. I mean, that's one of the most. I fished the fire hole one day, and I didn't really have a good. I think I caught 8 fish, all dry fly fish. There's a white wing caddis that comes off. That river, obviously, because of the proximity to the road, is it's very easy to get to. You can pull off at any point and see just a ton of fish rising. And I think I went down there and I was fishing. I started with like a size 16 rusty elk hair, and I caught a fish really quickly, I think second cast, and I thought, oh wow, this is going to be easy. And then all of a sudden these little white-winged caddis started coming off, in the I don't even know, tens of thousands, and the amount of fish, the amount of browns that were rising on these caddis were just, I've never seen so many fish rising simultaneously. And you'd look at it and you'd think, man, I'm about to crush 100 fish on dry flies right now. Like, I'm going to go Orvis and do a double dry just so I can catch them 2 at a time. And, you make a bunch of casts and you have these impeccable drag-free drifts, and these fish are just boiling all around your caddis. And your caddis is just floating untouched, just in this tumultuous, perfect storm of fish rising. And they won't eat it. And then, so, you burn through your whole box, you go through every caddis pattern you have in 2 or 3 different sizes. And, you fish for 3 hours and you catch 8 fish. And I come to find out later that a good friend of mine who used to guide out of Headhunters said that the trick to those fish is you fish down to them. So rather than fishing up, you fish down and you just, you do a little stack cast. And if you can gather that tippet on top of itself and get, a foot or 16 inches of drag-free drift fishing down to those fish, they become a lot less stipulative. And I didn't have time to employ that strategy because I only had a few hours to spend, but I'll never forget how many fish were rising. And, I was happy with my 7 or 8 fish that I got, but yeah, no, it was definitely a good dose of humility. That's for sure.
Kurt and I did a road trip to Yellowstone a couple of years ago, and it's just unbelievably overwhelming because you have so many fish or so many rivers that are on the radar there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You got, there you have to fish the Madison, and then you have to fish the Gallatin, you have to fish the Firehole, and you have to fish the Yellowstone. And then if you have more time, you go up and fish the Missouri, and then go over to the Bitterroot, and there's too much. So
yeah,
we went up to the Madison for 2 days, and then between Quake Lake and Hebgen in what do they call it, between the lakes or whatever, and we fished the Firehole for like 2 hours maybe. It was kind of some drive-by fishing, but it's so hard when you're there and you're there for a limited amount of time to try to figure it out.
That's it. That's just it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Do you have like rivers that are, or fish that are kind of haunting you still because you only had one chance at it, and you might not, you're not sure when you're going to get back there again? I have one in Arkansas. I fished the White River, and you have this massive, 26, 28 inch brown trout. And I caught a couple of nice brown trout in the 16, 18 inch range, which is awesome. But there are a couple that you just smack this huge hopper down in the water, and then the fish come up and rise. You can see the face just so casually, and I can still see it, and I can still see me just ripping that fly out of its mouth before it takes. And then it happened twice, but I don't know when I'm ever going to be back in Arkansas again. So do you have a river and a fish that's kind of nagging at you for what didn't happen?
Go ahead, Alex.
I can't name the river, but it is here in California, and it runs very low and clear, and there's some really nice fish on there, and they'll get to feeding. And I just remember this one. You can just tell just how it's waking. Like, this is a big fish. It was kind of in the shadow, and I couldn't really see, but oh my gosh, like, it would boil, and I wasn't sure if it was on my fly or next to it, but it was just driving me crazy. And I was, fishing down to it, just trying to do everything, and I wasn't spooking it, which was great. But oh my gosh, there's something about, I think it definitely sees a lot of pressure. But that being low and clear, you just have to be so stealthy, and longer leaders, and down to 6X tippet, maybe 7 sometimes. But it's like, oh my gosh. And then you're like, okay, if I hook this thing, like, how am I going to land it? It's going to go apeshit. But yeah, there's I know what you mean, Jeff. I mean, there's those fish that haunt you. For me, it's permit for saltwater stuff. But yeah, those dry fly rivers can, when the fish have PhDs in entomology, it's like how you gonna fool
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know that I have I don't know. I mean, as far as, seeing a huge fish working, and fishing, casting to that fish and not getting that fish to commit, not so much. Definitely not because I connect with every big fish that I've ever seen working a riffle or whatever. But I mean, for me, I like to spend the majority of my time in Wyoming. And I've had some really, really epic fishing and caught some nice fish. The Buff Fork is probably one of my favorite places to dry fly fish. It's once you put in some legwork and get back to some of those areas that see a lot less traffic, that the fish are pretty ready and willing. They're not overly difficult. They'll eat a elk hair caddis. Al Troth was a genius, and I've probably caught more fish on that fly than most. But yeah, the cutties are big back there, and they're not dumb, but they'll play and they'll cooperate, and probably caught more big cutthroat out of the Buff Fork than anything else, any other river. But yeah, I'm trying to think. The East Walker, I think everybody's dumped a huge fish on the East Walker at some point. I'm no exception. I fished a trico hatch on the East Walker. I don't know, it's probably 15 years ago, and there were just clouds of tricos everywhere. And it's funny because people say big fish, once they get 20 inches, they're not eating bugs. They're eating fry and they're chubs and crawdads and this, that, and the other. And well, I've seen big fish eat small bugs, and I hooked a big fish. It's funny fishing the East Walker because a lot of people will just wade in on the near side and they'll fish that near side. And especially if, it's up, CFS wise and there's water moving through, people get scared of it. I was up there and it was a pretty high water year, and there was there was a lot of water moving through there. And I like to wade to the far side, which probably isn't that there's a ton of boulders. I mean, it can get ugly pretty quick if you make the wrong decisions, but I like to wade to the far side and just fish that garbage on the far side. There's all kinds of overhanging trees and just it's really sloppy over there, but there's some amazing little runs and eddies and pocket water, like slow water. You can fish these seams and you can just look at it and pick it apart and see where those big fish would be lying. We have a good friend, Sam Vasily, that guides on the East Walker a lot, and he's got quite a few tanks out of that river. But yeah, I waded to the far side and I was fishing this little pocket that just looked, really good. And I remember a fish coming out to eat my. I was fishing a trico, and this fish came out, and it. When you're at SeaWorld and you're watching the Shamu show, and Shamu makes a beeline to come up on the shallow platform where he's gonna like put his tail up or whatever, and you just see that wake of water from this big creature moving, and that's what it was like. I mean, you could see this fish was literally moving water as he came and ate my fly, and I hooked him, and I got tight on him. And that's the thing about those big fish in the East Walker. They've all been hooked, and they all have, they're all smart. They know exactly what to do. It's not their first rodeo. And that fish, literally, I had it on an older generation Sage Graphite 3. I'm trying to think what it was, but it was like a medium fast action rod, and it was a dry fly rod, pretty soft. And that fish basically just came out right in front of me in the middle of the river where I was like, better than waist deep, and just was tailing right in front of me, straight up and down, knowing exactly what he was doing. And there was absolutely nothing I could do. And he just kind of toyed with me for about maybe 7 or 8 seconds. And then he did a U-turn and just ripped a bunch of line off my reel into my backing, came unbuttoned, and that was the end of it. So I think a lot of guys have a story like that on the East Walker. I've seen some literal like Leviathans swim by, 30-inch fish, 28, 30-inch fish when I've been fishing there. And there's just, I mean, that's the thing about fishing it is, you know, you have that potential to hook that fish of a lifetime. There are some trophy fish in there for sure.
The first time I've actually only fished the East Walker once, and it was when I was introduced to midges. I'd only been fly fishing for about, I don't know, maybe a year or something like that. So the fly fishing had just kind of stuck. And I just kept driving up over and got, oh, it's East Walker. We'll check it out here. And I saw some nice fish in there, but couldn't get them. I was just, just your basic starter kit with, big old Prince nymphs and things like that. And went by whatever fly shop was in there. Like, yeah, they're hitting on this. I'm like, what is that? Half of a fingernail. And I thought,
right.
And so you get that initial sort of, there's no way that this hook is going to attract anything. And then there's no way that this fish is actually going to, or the hook is going to stand a fish that's of any size. But so I need to get back there now that I know some stuff. What were some of your big moments in progression? Like, what kind of helped you out? A discovery of what to take you from like a basic sort of learning level to, all right, I can do this, and I feel confident going to any river I'm going to catch a fish or two.
I think the understanding of subsurface fishing, the whole nymph and indicator game, that was what really opened it up for me. Because I remember all I did was dry fly fish, and it was either only when I saw fish rising, that's the only time I would ever do it, and not really have a good understanding of bugs. But it was probably somewhere in the 90s, I can't remember, but I had gone up to fish up in the Portola area, this like one of the forks of the Feather River, and I walked into a fly shop, and it was like, I think one of the first fly shops I've ever walked into, because we never had any. And the guy was like, oh, they're biting on whatever, nymph. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I was like, oh, these wet flies. And he's like, oh yeah. And he goes, oh, here, take these indicators and the split shot. But he didn't tell me how to do it. He just said, so I just remember going out there and getting like a nasty tangle. And I'm like, you know what? I'm never going to nymph ever again. This is like the worst thing ever. But then it was maybe a few years later, and I met a friend of mine, and we ended up going fishing, and he was a fly guy too, but he had already done some nymphing. So he was like, dude, like, this is like, when they're not rising, this is how to do it. So that opened up, that was like something that just catapulted me forward in my whole fly fishing game and arsenal, and understanding, what my flies are doing under the indicator and hitting these different seams and, changing depths and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Then we start, whacking fish on them and realizing, okay, it doesn't have to be a full on dunk for there to be a fish to bite. It's like, it just moves over a little bit, or it just kind of goes down the river and does like a pause and then keeps going, like, that's possibly fish. So that just opened up a whole new world to me. And then I just realized that, okay, there's more to it. There's dry fly fishing, there's swinging, there's indicator fishing, there's throwing streamers. It's like, there's so much you can do with the fly rod. So anyway, that was my whole deal that just kind of just sent me over the edge. And that's what got me here today.
The subsurface game is definitely it's a whole different animal, and it's funny. I mean, people, we still have this idea of fly fishing, and people watch a river runs through it, and they think fly fishing is only a dry fly floating on top of the water, floating line, trout coming up, and which God, I'm not taking anything away from that. There's no better way to catch them. At the same time, it's so multifaceted, and you can really envelop yourself in the minutia of fly fishing. It's as extensive as you want to make it. It's kind of like a home renovation. You don't ever have to quit. You can keep ripping things apart and examining them and looking at them and exploring them and finding new ways to, with fly fishing, it's just, I think for me, the biggest progression happened when I really started sight fishing, and I started this ultimate pursuance of catching fish and putting eyes on fish that I was going to cast to, and then watching those fish commit, and bringing out that predator, watching those fish chase down a fly and crush it right in front of you, and getting to watch that eat. I mean, like we were saying, visceral. I mean, that's the most visceral experience to me is when you get to really watch everything unfold. And, you know, just a couple species that, you know, I think really did it for me were, you know, sight fishing Corbina, obviously, which is a big thing here in Southern California. You know, those fish, and the water temperature hits high 60s, right around 70 degrees, and those mole crabs start to show up, and those Corbina are moving in and feeding in, you know, inches of water, you know, backs out of the water. And to get and eat in 2 or 3 inches of water and watch that Corbina eat your fly and then just explode. I mean, that's something that's an incredible experience. And once you get a taste for that, I mean, you go out and do that and, you know, one fish is a good day, you know, but that experience is so overwhelming and it's just, it's so incredible that it's, you know, it's an easy ask to go out there and walk for, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 hours and get a multitude of shots. But, you know, those fish they're like a litter of puppies. And I've had fish that I've led by 10 or 12 feet, anticipating where I think they're going. And I'll put that fly right in the wheelhouse and they'll just spook and have nothing to do with it. And then I've had fish where I completely made a terrible cast and put that fly right on top of them, and they've just moved over and crushed it and never thought twice about it. So, you know, for me, I think that the pursuance of sight, you know, fish from a sight fishing perspective is the biggest game changer for me in terms of, you know, taking my fly fishing to the next level. And then I got into carp fishing, which I absolutely love. I'm a huge carp guy. You know, carp are uber intelligent. An adult carp's brain is the size of a walnut, which in the world of fish anatomy is, you know, makes every fish Albert Einstein. So, you know, you spook enough of those fish and, you know, you kind of get frustrated, whatever. But then once you start to figure them out, you know, you kind of learn them a little bit. And that can go for every tough fish, for, you know, for Corbina, carp, hermit, you know, fish that just have a tendency to be spooky, that you might have to work a little bit harder. But at the same time, once you figure out, you know, the level of gratification in getting a fish to commit and getting tight on it and putting it at your feet, you know, is just, it is that much better because of the conviction required to catch it.
Yeah. Well, now the big question, at some point we convince ourselves that better gear is going to make us a better fisherman, right? And so that next level, like, oh, well, maybe there's some sort of monetary thing to this too. I remember I found a fly fishing video and Jamie Lyle was talking about the TXLF. And I thought, why would I ever need a one weight? And I'm watching this video. I'm like, I don't think yes, I need one right now. So I spent money on this because it was about how can I enhance this experience. I'm starting to figure out, you know, I can catch fish when I go out there and I'm catching fish on dry flies. That's great. But, you know, these smaller Sierra Nevada trout, you know, on a 5-weight, it's cool. Maybe it would be better on this. And it was upgrade the 5-weight first to a Sage VT2, which was sweet. And then the TXLF, and then I got a Sage 1.
Nice.
Which, again, like a lot of that, you know, they talk about a lot of the improvements in technology are things that you can't even, the common fisherman can't even get the most out of those sort of rods. But they do, even if you aren't very good, they do something to the fishing experience. So how did you convince yourselves to kind of upgrade, and what are some of the reasons why upgrading to better equipment is kind of necessary and you're improving?
Oh, I totally agree with you. And, you know, even before I got into the fly fishing industry, I had some older equipment that I'd used for the longest time. And I remember somebody just told me, like, why don't you put a brand new fly line on there? And that was like the biggest game changer. And even just a fly line on, you know, even if you had an older rod or something that, you know, wasn't the latest technology, but I mean, even the simple as putting a new fly line on there can change that whole setup. But yeah, having the right gear, and that started for me. It's like, it was a fly line. Like, I couldn't believe how much the rod performed with the brand new fly line. I was like, hey, now what if I had a nicer rod that maybe wasn't a full flex rod or something a little bit stiffer, and I can cast into the wind a little bit, or I can, have a little bit more of a precise mend. And then you start seeing the potential of, oh my gosh, upgrading my rod. Now I have a whole different setup, and now I can do stuff that I really couldn't do, or maybe I could do them with my old setup, but now I'm a little bit more efficient with it. I'm able to roll cast a little bit further. Now I'm able to put my cast, right in those tight spots that I couldn't do it before. So I think for me, it was, it was firsthand of seeing what a fly line could do, and then seeing what the next step in technology of a rod could do. And then now that I sell these things and I get the latest and greatest one in my hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is even an improvement on the last one. It's like, how could you even do that? Like you probably, like you said, the TXLF, like I got a new rod for you that, called the Dart. You'd probably be like, oh my gosh, this is like, so much better than a TXLF. But I mean, you'll see you'll automatically see, the changes in the technology and what you can do with them. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's my take on it.
I did give my TXLF to Kurt when I moved back up here, so I don't have it.
You don't have that anymore.
I bought my Sage 1 is a 9.6 6 weight, because what I had in mind was specific to fishing the lower Sac, which was, nymph rigs with an indicator and weight and just a lot of extra stuff. So that extra 6 inches was awesome. It just felt like this is exactly what I wanted. So I used it for steelhead up here, which is there's a little bit. It was a little sketchy. The first really big steelhead I hooked into outside. This is a little scary than it is fun. This is a really nice rod and just doesn't have the spine for some of these bigger steelheads. So I can get it in, but it's just going to take a little bit more time. And so I got a Sage method. Man, I'm terrible.
Oh,
I have no voice of reason.
Yeah, I know that TXLF. I was looking through some old photos, and we went fishing. Kurt and I did a trip, and he had that TXLF, and we were fishing. Actually, it was a San Joaquin out the backside of Mammoth.
Oh man!
Oh gosh, it was so fun. Yeah, that stretch.
Dude, that's one of my favorite. You don't go to the San Joaquin to catch big fish. You go. I fish the San Joaquin to catch little wild fish, like beautiful fish. I just love that place so much. Yeah,
you took me there a couple of years ago, and that was so much fun. You just wear out flies.
Totally. Yeah.
Fishing. That was, he said, and then I'll take you to the San Joaquin, and then I'll let you use your old rod and say, this is exactly why this rod was made. And I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, dude, that's a perfect spot for it. That's killer.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, with my gear and I don't know. I completely agree with you. I think that my casting, I don't have a pretty cast. I never have. I don't have like a really nice aesthetic to my fly casting, and if you look at my entire quiver, it's kind of funny. I have some great connections that I could really have an amazing. Alex is really disappointed with my fly rod quiver. All my stuff is middle of the road, pretty much workhorse type stuff. I have a bunch of Reddington rods that I fish harder and more so than anything else. But even like my nicer rods are G5 technology. Like they're not kinetic rods. They're right in the middle of the Sage graphite matrix technology. Nothing too crazy, but I totally agree with you, Jeff. I think that when I go fishing, I have rods that I know their personality in and out, and I kind of make them do what I want. Not to say that, a rod with more, torsion stability or, a different taper wouldn't work better. But at the same time, you learn that rod in and out, what its capabilities are. And I can take my rods pretty much wherever to any application and get them to do what I need good enough to get tight on some fish. And I mean, that's the way I look at it is, you know, they're good enough. I'm not saying that's the right way. It's just, it's kind of my own perspective. But as far as metaphors, I would just kind of, you know, Rio Gold, it's a fly line and it does everything pretty good. You can dry fly fish with it. You know, the taper's good for dry fly fishing. You can nymph with it. You can streamer fish with it, and, you know, floating line applications. But, you know, it's not a niche fly line. It's just designed to kind of do everything. And that's kind of the way I would describe my entire fly fishing quiver. It just kind of does everything, you know, good enough, but probably nothing exceptionally well. Like if I'm going to go fish the surf and I need to cast like a heavy full sink, I just need a fast action rod. You know, I don't need a specific fast action rod. I just, you know, I'll go, and I tend to gravitate towards softer rods. I like them better, but yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it.
How many rods do you have?
How many rods do I have? I think I have about, well, including, I have some really old Fenwick fiberglass stuff and some Cortland fiberglass rods that were given to me by a dear friend. I mean, everything included, nothing ridiculous. I probably have, I don't know, 15 or 16 fly rods.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not too crazy, but I mean, I employ the same workhorse fly rods. You know, I have a 3, a 5, and a 6 that pretty much get fished. And I tend to fish undergunned unless I'm in a situation, you know, if I'm fishing Hot Creek in July and the water temperature is, you know, warm and I don't want to exhaust fish, obviously I'm going to take that into deep consideration and I'm not going to fish a light rod. But, you know, for a lot of like the carp fishing I do, my carp rod is a 3-weight. And it's a straight medium action. It's not a medium fast. I mean, the thing is a wet noodle, and it's so much fun to go and get in, you know, sight fish these carp from, you know, 3 to 7 pounds and get tight on these fish and just get absolutely like your ass handed to you. It's just, it's the best. It's the best. You know, I wouldn't have it any other way. So those applications where you're not compromising the fish's well-being or the fish's health, in order to be able to fish a lighter rod, I really like to do that. You know, that's an angle I like to take. So,
have you guys messed around with bamboo at all?
I have. I had a bamboo rod there for a little bit. When I first met Kurt and I worked at the Bass Pro in Manteca, this guy made a bamboo rod and gave it to me, which was really cool. And I fished that one a little bit. It's it's got its time and place to do it. And now that I have, you know, rods to choose from, like if I'm going to go dry fly fishing, that's like, I'm going to pick up another rod to do it because it's lighter in the hand and I'm more accurate with it. But I mean, for the nostalgia, you know, aspect of it, bamboos is pretty cool. It's nice to see them on the wall. I like to hang.
Yeah, it's nice to have one to look at. Yeah. I have a bamboo rod. Don't ever fish it.
Yeah, I read a book. I think it was called "Casting a Spell" and talked about the history of bamboo rods. It just really, I felt enamored with the whole thing and the poetry of it and kind of the roots of it and the old school. Because, you know, we would look back at, whenever I go to California and I go to these rivers, I think, man, what was this like beforehand? You fished in the McLeod, right? Like, man, I can't imagine if Chinook were up here and Steelhead were up here. This would be unbelievable. But then if you go back in time to that point, you know, our recreation catch and release didn't exist, you know, so we're projecting the contemporary standards on something that didn't exist at that time. But you think about some of the early days of the bamboo fly fishing, like, man, that'd be so sweet. So I got really excited about bamboo. I never bought one, but I was like, man, if you have one of those, if I could go to a garage sale and someone's selling one of those old Leonards that's worth like 10,000 and I get it for like $8 or whatever. But, you just look, it kind of took me down this rabbit hole of history. Do you guys have like a river and a time and like an old writer or an old angler or something like that? Like, dude, I would have loved to have fished this river with this icon in fly fishing.
I would the river that I would fish is actually the river that I first learned how to fly fish on. It's the South Fork of the San Joaquin, which is on the west slope, not on the east slope behind Mammoth. And that's where I learned to fly fish. And I was like, man, this is, I would love to have been here. Yeah, like you said, yeah, way back when, and when the fish were huge, and yeah, I always dreamt about that as a kid. Like what was this like? Before people were coming here and to hike in here. And I would say the iconic person would be Joe Brooks. He was basically the first book I picked up about fly fishing when I was like in 7th or 8th grade. Actually, a friend gave it to me. So that would be the only one, because that was like my first taste of like, oh, they're making books about this stuff. And, I felt like there wasn't a whole lot available when I grew up. Like I said, there was no tackle shops, no fly shops. So getting your hands on a magazine, or getting your hands on something that you talked about what you loved, was like the coolest thing ever. So I just remember that was like, an author that I could say that this guy was a fly fisherman, and this is who is, the godfather, and, he actually is. So at that time I didn't know, but now that, there's so much publication, the different stuff out there, and you start talking about Lefty Cray and, some of these guys that came before us, and this kind of put fly fishing on the map. I mean, Joe Brooks was definitely the one for me.
That's cool. Okay, I'd probably have to say, I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. Like, I didn't see that question coming. Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably go fish the Kings River in Ireland with. I'd probably go fish it with Lefty, only because I've heard Alex talk about Lefty so much and everything. I didn't know Lefty, never met Lefty. I've read about him a little bit and read into him a little bit, but just Alex and I share a mutual friend who has so many just really good, genuine things to say about him, that he seems like he would be an absolutely amazing dude to share an afternoon of chalk stream fishing with, and just talk fly fishing and get tied on a few with. So yeah, I guess that would be my answer.
Yeah, whenever I think about that, because I'll get nostalgic, or I don't even know if you can be nostalgic for an area that you weren't around for, but you start thinking about how cool that would be. But then, like, you're using their gear. If you're doing like tarpon with Ted Williams, and you show up with a 10 weight, Sage something, and he's like, wait, what is this? I'm like, oh,
right,
yeah. Well, maybe I don't even know how to use this, man. But that that's part of it. When it started to become recreation and such an important part of
right.
America has expanded to be this, like, things are so good for us now. We complain about our Wi-Fi signal. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that is funny. Yeah. First world problems.
Yeah, no doubt. Jeez.
Well, what else you guys got? We're rolling up on about an hour here. So you got closing thoughts? Anything you want to add? I'll give you.
The only thing I want to add, man, is I want to go up and go to Alaska. I know Dave's been up there, but I know Kurt, has been up and fished with him. He keeps talking about going up and doing the steelhead thing.
We got to do that, Alex. That would be a
my gosh.
Come up, meet up with Jeff, do some fishing. That would be amazing.
I want to like do it all.
Did you tell you how that went down last time?
Oh my God, dude. I'm surprised you guys are alive. Yeah, he did. Yeah. The whole thing with the boat and
the funny thing was that I was going based on the previous 2 years, and I just moved back, and I was figuring out this because I didn't grow up steelhead fishing here and fly fishing, and so I'd learned fly fishing in California because that was the only way that you could go to a river and you could fish, and you were pretty sure that you were going to be obeying all the rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason I picked up fly fishing. And so coming back here and moving back, and steelhead fishing, the easiest way to do it was suspending a jig under an indicator, which is like the grossest way to do it, but it was effective. And if you want to get some good fish, it was like, hey, all right, let's do this, and then we can graduate from that low level. But so I'm like, hey man, tie up these jigs. I have some other stuff, we'll do some swinging too, but tie up these jibs just in case. Just paying $800 to come up here, so let's at least get you a fish. And then the weather was great, and then running out of gas, and then we were just floating like, oh, we should probably paddle here just in case the tide's going out. And then hearing the wolves, it was like, oh god, being towed back to town, and then getting it fixed, coming back out, and then I felt bad because our best day was the day that it was rainy, and he caught a really nice rainbow, and I caught one. But then after that, it just kind of turned off. The water was low, it was cold, and it had everything was about 2-3 weeks late that year, just because of the weather. When you're fishing island up here, you don't get the same consistent sort of runs and water flows.
Right.
It's not fed by mainland, so things vary quite a bit. And so we guessed on a week that I thought would be good, and man, it just ended up not really working out. So it was a lot of fun, but that's Kurt's got a great attitude, and so
he's got an awesome attitude.
Jeff, is that how it typically is? I knew this summer I fished 2 summers up there, and I know that there can also be some fluctuation, a couple weeks, year to year, based on you want to try and get up there when everything is happening. And do you deal with the same level of fluctuation in the summertime that you do in the shoulder seasons and that kind of thing?
Well, once the salmon start up, like you can have your start is usually within a week or 2, maybe at the most 3. But then once it's on, it's on. So once they're in the river, it's like it's you're good to go. So with steelhead, it's a little bit different because the runs aren't as big. You're not talking about the river's now flooded with total fish.
Right.
But last year too, it was off by about 3 weeks, and so it wasn't until late April, early May that we were starting to get good runs of fish up there once the water had kind of warmed up a little bit, and we caught a couple of holdovers on top of this lake. But it's like it's just different. But some of those mainland rivers you can figure it out a little bit more. But it's always fun. It's there. Most of the rivers around here you have to get to by boat. There is one river that you can drive to, and so right about now is when I would start to drive to school, fish for steelhead for about a half hour or so, and then get to work. Or you can fish after school too.
That's great
because it's right there. And I got a really nice winter fish on January 1st. So you have that, but you used to get a lot of people stacked up there too. And so part of we talked about at the beginning is where you're going and what you're doing and who you're sharing it with. And if it's ideal to not have anybody else there, if they're not in your party. You talked about how you fish 90-95% alone, and that's the same thing with me. I like that I can move when I want, I can change what I want, I can do whatever I want. It's on my own time. And if it's with 2 or 3 of my buddies, then we're on the same page. So but
it's funny. It's such a different factor, talking fishing alone versus fishing with friends. But when I really look at it, I have a lot of friends that fish. How many of them do I actually want to fish with, versus fish by myself and maybe go BS with them and have some beers or whatever and talk. It's just it's an interesting, I guess it's just kind of all how I definitely have friends that it's more cumbersome to fish with them versus fishing by myself. Just like you're saying, there's so much more leverage when you fish alone. But at the same time, those really epic days and those epic fish and epic experiences, it's really nice to be able to share those with people and get the really great photo ops, whatever. So I guess it goes both ways.
Yeah. I went up 2 years ago, and it was a little bit early still. I think it was during the tail end of spring break or something like that. We went up there, and it was cold, and it was snowy, and we rented this cabin, a little Forest Service cabin. There's no heat. There's no electricity. There's firewood, so you can make your own heat, but there's no bedding, there's no electricity, no running water, anything like that. So we rented that for 2 nights. And my buddy was one of them was fine. Another one was pretty miserable because he's a florist, not florist. He does flooring. Sorry, that's wow.
Oh, okay.
That's two different.
Different. That's way different. I never thought about it.
Yeah.
You do flooring, you're a florist. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But he was
That's
pretty
funny.
miserable. And then on the last day, it warmed up to about 40 degrees. It was a beautiful day, and I'd caught a couple fish. And my buddy who does flooring was like, you know what? I'm not. This isn't bad. This isn't so bad. And then he 2 minutes later, he set off his bear spray, and so he just got nuked by his own bear spray. And so,
Oh man, that sucks.
Wasn't good anymore. Yeah, if you have people who are on the same level and they're cool with, hey man, I'm going to fish up here, fish down there. We'll meet back at camp at whenever. I know that you're going to be a safe waiter and you're going to do whatever, but that's kind of fun.
Yeah, and that's just it, man. Being able to identify, someone who's going to go after it the same way you are. Because I mean, when Alex and I fish, we go and we fish really hard, and we'll fish for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours straight, in the pursuance of getting the rod to bend. And there's a lot of people that want to go fish for an hour and a half and then want to go have lunch and get a beer. And, time to go fishing is divided up, and it's precious. And you have to really have someone who's on the same wavelength, as you are. Otherwise, again, it just becomes more of a chore than anything. So.
Sure. All right. Well, closing thoughts. Pitch the podcast. Where can people find you?
Yeah, man. So it's called Beer, Fly Fishing, and Food, and right now we're on Anchor.com. We're also on Spotify, and I'm just waiting to get on iTunes. But it's Beer, Fly Fishing, and Food.
Yeah, if you like any of those things, give it a listen.
Yeah,
multi-dynamic.
For sure. Yeah. I appreciate you having us on, Jeff.
Yeah,
man,
Jeff, thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you,
it sounds
guys.
like we're going to have to get you on ours, man. You have some good stories about, I'm sure, all those three things. Listen to some of your podcasts. That's cool.
Well, I fail a lot, and I'm not. I'm okay with sharing it. Some people like to keep those things to themselves. But I'm like, hey, you know what? There's a lot of other people who suck at fishing or hunting or whatever. So I'm okay with sharing those stories. So
I'm right there with you.
All right, guys.
Cool, man.
Thanks again.
You
Yeah,
bet. Take
thanks for
care,
having
man.
us, man.
Have a good evening.
Take
See
care.
ya. All right.
Bye.